Welcome to the show, Anne-Marie.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you very much for being here. I'm looking forward to this one. As someone who's been in journalism for 30 years, I guess you've seen it all.
Journalism as a whole, it's a weird field. Everyone from my dentist to my parents' friends are telling me, don't go into that. There's no jobs. There's no money.
Did you think you made a mistake at that point?
I remember even in journalism school writing an article about the future of digital journalism, and it was extremely threatening. Everyone was just very resistant to it and slow. Newspapers died in the face of this.
Something that's always talked about nowadays, how the mainstream media don't give us the real news.
All of these people have an agenda. Are you ever getting the real truth? I wasn't aware enough at the time, but I can tell you where it slapped me in the face. I lost my mom. She died of cancer. She was always a very ill person. So it now makes sense that I always gravitated to health and alternative treatments.
Are there different pills that do less damage?
You are literally taking your natural hormonal cycle, your monthly ovulation, and you're putting yourself into menopause with synthetic hormones.
Guys, Matt Haycox here, and welcome to another episode of the Matt Haycox Show, where today I have got a very distinguished health and wellness journalist, businesswoman, entrepreneur, and expert in holistic therapy, sustainability, women's well-being, and quite specifically menopause as well. She's here with me in Dubai. She lives all the way from Canada, but living down the road in Abu Dhabi. Now, we're going to talk about a lot of things today, and if you guys have heard me mention menopause and started to switch off thinking this is not going to be a usual Matt Haycox podcast, don't do that just yet, because there's going to be, well, two sides. We're going to talk about midlife aging. You guys know I talk about testosterone and my testosterone journey a lot, so we'll bring that in with menopause. But also there's a big business angle here as well, because Anne-Marie has wanted to kind of transition from, I guess, from journalist to businesswoman, entrepreneur, has launched a newsletter, has launched a podcast, and is quite openly finding her feet with how does she take content and monetize it. So we're going to cover all kinds of different aspects. It's going to be a fun one. I'm looking forward to digging deep. Welcome to the show, Anne-Marie.
Thanks for having me.
No problem. Thank you very much for being here. I'm looking forward to this one. So give me a little bit of background of how we're here and where's this started. I guess we don't need to go too deep into the journey, but you were a journalist who's arrived in Abu Dhabi to work at the National when that was launched. You tell me in 2008, was that?
Yeah, 2008. That was the English newspaper that was launched by the Abu Dhabi government, and I was on a team of 250 journalists that came over, and that was a huge experience. It was almost like a second university. Do you have Freshers Week or Frosh Week in the UK?
We call it Freshers Week, yeah.
That's what it was like. I did not anticipate that at all. It was super fun, and I came for a year and ended up staying. I'm still here.
2008 was that the kind of crash time over
Well,
here?
it was right before the crash, so we arrived and everything was like opportunity and booming, and they were building all the museums in Abu Dhabi, and they were building everything, and everything was bright. And then the crash came, and it was really an interesting time to be here.
When did the crash happen?
2009.
Okay.
Yeah. So it was just really interesting, and I feel like I was much less like business aware then. Like, I feel like I didn't really grasp the enormity of it, because for me, I had moved from Canada, my salary had doubled. I was, journalists don't ever make very much money. So for me, financially, I was fine. And I know we were talking about it every day in the news meetings and stuff, but I feel like it, in the fullness of time, it took me a little bit.
Did you think you made a mistake at that point? Was it like was it a worry that you might lose your jobs and you'd be on your way back to Canada?
No, we didn't ever feel like that. They did cancel our bonuses. We were told you get bonuses at the end of the year for staying. I remember there were some people really upset about that, but I was still riding a high, because coming from Canada and journalism as a whole, it's a weird field, because from the moment I decided to go into journalism, everyone from my dentist to my parents' friends are telling me, don't go into that. There's no jobs. There's no money. And luckily, my friend's older brother, he gave me some really good advice. He's a lawyer. He said, Annie, just do whatever you want, because honestly, he was a lawyer. He said, I'm bored. It's boring. Yeah, I make a lot of money, but if you want to do it, try it. And that was really good advice. But I came from Canada, where everyone's getting laid off. The field is shrinking. It's even more now. But when I arrived here, it still was such a world of opportunity that I feel like the crash didn't really dent me at all. Other than I did buy a property in Malaysia that wasn't the greatest investment, because I just didn't want to put my money in the stock market, because I didn't know anything about the stock market, and
Why
I didn't realize.
Buy here?
I looked around and I just felt uncomfortable about the structure and the mechanisms, and I ended up buying it there. And now I know so much more about investing that was a great time to buy. Was after the crash, right? I get that now. But when you're scared and you're sort of on your own and don't know what to do, I made some decisions that were like.
So as someone who's been in journalism for 30 years, I mean, I guess you've seen it all in terms of from print to digital, and from digital going good to digital. I say going bad, but I guess I'm talking about the demonetization to a degree, or what someone would call it democratization. Others would say it's just killed the business. I mean, how have you experienced that from your side of the table?
God, I feel like I've just been perfectly positioned to see the whole thing, because I remember even in journalism school writing an article about the future of digital journalism and speaking to editors at Canadian newspapers, and they were saying,
as far back then. I mean, I'm sorry. I'm not.
Yeah.
Not
so I was in journalism school in as far back then. Yeah, journalism school in 1993, 94.
And they were already talking about it back then.
An editor of one of Canada's biggest newspapers told me, we're going to be reading a newspaper on the top of a mountain if you want. And of course that seemed crazy, but I don't know how the technology works. And at that point, I would go into work. In my first job, where I was an intern, we had one computer that you went on the internet, and all your news would come through the fax machine, and you would just get faxes, and then you would call. You would just call. That's how I started doing it. And I had maps, and I would have to drive out into the country and find a house, or find an accident, or find a sheep show, or whatever. And then it slowly started working where we had the internet, and then I feel like I'm ancient, but then we got email addresses. In 1998, I think, was when we started using email addresses. And then that was great. And we're still laying out the paper, cutting pieces of paper, and they would have boards and have it all laid out. And then it slowly, I remember asking for a press release over the fax machine, and someone saying, well, have you seen our website? And of course I was like, I don't want to go to your website because there's one computer and it's slow. And then it just took off. But one thing I've seen business-wise is how newspapers died in the face of this. And I think it was mostly, and I'm not, slamming the patriarchy or men or anything, but the editors that I had just never took it seriously. There was always this sort of, the old pompous newspaper editor type person who's I know the news that you should be reading, and I am going to give you a selection of that news, and it's up to me to make the decisions. And it was extremely threatening to them, the democratization that came with digital, the digital revolution in news, right? Because all of a sudden people are telling you what they want to read rather than just reading what you give them. And that was extremely confronting to the people who were running newspapers, who just happened to be mostly men at the time. And that I encountered that when I came over to here too, because there were editors from all over the world. Everyone was just very resistant to it and slow. And now I can see that that's sort of how and why newspapers died. They just took too long. And
tell me, as someone who's worked, within the mainstream media for a long time, and obviously something that's always talked about nowadays is how the mainstream media don't give us the real news, or give us their direction or their agenda. I mean, it's not a day goes by when you don't see a picture, for example, on Instagram where someone's showing this is what the mainstream media is showing. I don't know, it could be a riot somewhere, and this is what the man on the street showing, and there's 4 people at this riot. Whatever it is. I mean, are there any real life experiences you can talk about where you've been told, this is an agenda we're following, or where that you or someone else has been, I guess, writing lies, to put it bluntly?
Yeah, it's really interesting that you say that, and it's emotional for me because I dreamed of this career. I love telling stories, but I now call myself a recovering journalist because I know that I was part of this system, but I wasn't really aware of it. So when people who don't know anything about it talk about it, like telling lies, and you were instructed to, it's not like that. Like anything else, it's so subtle, if that makes sense. So examples I can use from early in my career were that I was always interested in holistic alternative treatments. I lost my mom when she was 53, my age that I am now, and I was 27. She died of cancer, and she was always a very ill person. So it now makes sense that I always gravitated to health and alternative treatments and holistic, looking at the body. It's not, a cluster of symptoms, but what's the root cause of things. When I tried to do those stories, often they would be discouraged, but not in the way that you would think. Not like, you can't write that. Just discouragement. Do you know what I mean?
People aren't really interested in that.
People aren't really interested, or do more work. You have to do more of this. This is how it happens. And how I sort of learned that was when I came over to Abu Dhabi, and there were actually things we couldn't write. And I thought, the editor would just say, you can't write that here. And the first editors did do that. But later, as I was at the paper, there were people who weren't as comfortable with saying that. And they would do the same thing. Oh, the reporter needs to do more work. Oh, just like delay. You know how people, when they don't want to deal with something. And so that's how I've sort of found it out.
So where are these agendas coming from? So your editor's telling you, oh, your story needs a bit more work. We can't run that just yet. But, you know, where's he getting his direction or his advice from?
This is what I've never really understood. And there was a moment when I worked in Canada, and I was a columnist in Canada, a national columnist. And I wrote a column about the former prime minister's son, who became an entertainment guy. And I wrote a column. Everyone loved to hate this guy because he was very good looking and obviously came from a privileged family. And I wrote a column about why his name is Ben Mulroney, and Brian Mulroney was our former prime minister, was his father, who was on our board of the newspaper chain. So I guess that was in there somewhere. But what I wrote was, why does everyone hate Ben Mulroney? I think he's a great guy. I'd met him. I said, he's a great guy. He's not doing a boring law degree. He wants to be on Entertainment Tonight Canada. Like, I wrote sort of like a fan piece, but a thoughtful fan piece.
Yeah.
Spiked. The editor has never told me. And every couple of years I'll say, why'd you spike that Ben Mulroney piece? I don't know. I don't know, but that's the most blatant example I have. I have situations where they would say, that was an advertiser, you can't mention that. But as for the general mood and direction of things that could and couldn't be written about, I can't really tell you. And I wasn't aware enough at the time to really understand that I was part of the system, but I can tell you where it slapped me in the face. If you want to hear, sure. Where I really was like during COVID, where a lot of people sort of woke up to this, right? I've been reading clinical studies for a long time. I wasn't an anti-COVID. I wasn't a no masker. No, I was in the middle. I was saying a lot of this doesn't really make sense to me. Some of the things that we're doing, they're not what would have been done in public health. This seems really repressive and restrictive. This seems like there's really smart people over here saying that some of these measures we're taking are hurting people, and then they're being censored. Everything seemed very weird to me. And it's when I started to see the media for what it was. And then in Canada, there was a protest movement with a convoy. There was like the truckers. They formalized, they organized, they rode across the country, and they arrived in the capital, Ottawa, to protest. And they parked their trucks, and everyone hated them. And I was kind of from afar going like, this is a really cool thing that's happening. This is like in our Charter on Rights and Freedoms, we have these rights enshrined. We have the right to protest. We have the right to speak up. We have all these rights. And first of all, I noticed, I mean, if it was back in the day, I worked in Ottawa, the Ottawa Sun, we would have gone and written amazing stories. We would have written like they had laundry lines because these trucks were all parked on Parliament Hill. People were setting up bouncy castles. There were food stalls. We would have been doing all these human interest stories. All I saw was negative stories. All I saw, like a big story. We have a hero in Canada, Terry Fox. He ran across the country. He had cancer and he ended up dying. He's our national hero. There's races around the world. Someone put a scarf and a hat on him. It was a story. Like Terry Fox's monument was desecrated. Like that's the kind of coverage that was being done. And these are my former colleagues. And then I looked at my former colleagues on Facebook and it was just all negative. These right-wing Trumpian.
Did you speak to any of them?
No, I just looked at Facebook and I was having a real.
No, but I mean, as in, did you ask any of these people why they were taking that view, taking that angle? I don't even know. I just was like, I don't even know these people. I don't even know what's going on anymore. I don't even understand. It was a really weird time for me because it was so opposite to what we would have done. And there was such an agenda to demonize these pretty peaceful protesters. And there was also a push to call it a white nationalist movement and misogynist. Our prime minister was doing that. But I mean, you only had to look at live footage to see there was like Sikhs and like every color of the rainbow of Canada. So I hope I'm not like going on too long about it, but it was just a real moment where I was like, this agenda does exist. And I guess it existed all the time. I just didn't know about it. And so the people who were going down to cover the protests are looking for the negative stuff. Sure. And then I started thinking about, I covered a lot of protests when I was in Canada. And I would go down there and there at Parliament Hill, there'd be a protest every Saturday or Sunday. And if I worked the weekend, I would go. And
one of the other stories was that there was Nazis at this protest, and there were like one or two Nazis. And I said to my friends, those Nazis would always come to protest. They're very opportunistic. Like there'd be a protest on like Armenian genocide, and then there'd be some Nazis in the corner. I can go and I can focus on that negative element, and I can make a story. And I kind of need to, because you can't go back to the newsroom and say, that was a beautiful protest. Everyone is really happy and they have, they have a great, that doesn't fly. And I guess I didn't really realize that. And that's where I started to realize that when you focus on the sensationalistic small part, you're not reflecting reality. And then I started to think about how news covers what's rare and it's not really what's true. And that if you are going against that tide, you're going to have a very hard time and probably a pretty short career. But I was oblivious to all of this. I really, in my career, was like, I'm telling the truth. I'm telling the stories. And now I just wonder, what I did. And the other thing is, everyone you speak to when you're a journalist and you're calling people, you're getting sources. Some of them are angels where there's, they'll always call you back. All of these people have an agenda and a reason to speak with you. Right? Like they're all speaking with you for a reason. And so are you ever getting the real truth? What are you getting? Right? Like, so all that to say, it's very nuanced, but I don't recognize media at all.
So last thing, I guess, to say on this, and then we can move on to some of your stuff. I guess back in the day, when you were first doing journalism, there was no social media. There was, little, if any, web. And when a story got canned, then it was just canned and, would probably not get to see the light of day. And, manipulation, so information could be better manipulated. Whereas nowadays, there's so many other routes to it, whether that's social media, people's blogs, whatever. I mean, do you find now that the stories always do get out in some kind of a way?
Yeah, well, we're seeing that with protests around the world about Palestine, and you can see that people are protesting, you're just not always seeing, and then you're seeing violent clashes, that's what you're seeing. But one powerful example of this, and why I love the democratization of information that digital brought, was the birth control pill. So I was someone who was put on the birth control pill at 16 because, menstrual irregularities, as many girls are. And I was on it for 10 years. And I went off of it after a relationship ended. And I feel almost like my life was gray before. And I feel like it was color after. And I had a long period of very weird acne and just like bodily stuff. So I became very interested in what was that birth control pill doing to me? Because what I was told was it was just regulating my hormones and making everything nice. And when I would research, because there was such a limited way to research before sort of like the web took off, always the answer is, you see so many articles, is the birth control pill good for you? Yes, always. You always have a doctor saying, yes, it's great. And then you started to see bloggers, and this is where I loved bloggers, and stories would always get canned if I said, I have a story about this, the birth control pill might not be that good for you. Well, who's saying it? And I would say, well, I have these bloggers. Psh, no, that would be a way it would get canned, right? These people became experts in their area, and often they were people who experienced problems with the birth control pill. This is one of the most controversial things in the entire field of women's health, because we're now finding out that there are impacts of the pill that will affect you for the rest of your life. You are literally taking your natural hormonal cycle, your monthly ovulation, and you're putting yourself into menopause with synthetic hormones. And we know that the clitoris can shrink by up to 20 or 30% when you're on the pill. It can cause gut problems. It can cause problems in your brain, changes. There's studies that you actually might choose a different partner. These things have all come out. And this is what the truth will come out. But I'm still reading articles. I'm still seeing doctors saying it's perfectly safe. It doesn't alter anything. I mean, even the period you have on the pill is not a real period. So this is just one example where I feel like I just love seeing this. I just love seeing people focusing on the truth, putting it out, even if you're not going to see that, because big pharma, the pill is one of the most lucrative, surely. And also hot button topics, because it brought us our freedom,
I mean, are there different pills that do less damage versus other ones, or different methods, or is everything in the same boat of damage?
It's really weird, because I was told at 16, this is the mini pill. It's a progesterone only pill. And I was on, I think it was called Monavril. But now, because now that I know more about hormone therapy, I'm still learning a lot. There is a difference between progesterone, which is what we make in our body that is bioidentical, and forms of estrogen that are bioidentical, and synthetic hormones. And the synthetic form of progesterone is called progestin. And that's what I was taking for 10 years. And if there's any risk signals for breast cancer when it comes to hormone therapy, they seem to be coming from progestin. Progestin seems to be causing a lot of the problems. So there's not a birth control pill that gives you a bioidentical hormone that's just like what your body takes. The pill works by replacing your hormones with synthetic hormones, removing your natural ovulation. That's how it works. So no, that's how the pill works. And it works great for a lot of people, but for a lot of people it doesn't. And we have some documentaries talking about it. And it's always very, very, very controversial to talk about. And I guess because
so much money spent lobbying for big pharma.
If you start saying the pill is not great, I mean, that's just, I think over 100 million women are on the birth control pill. And it's brought, as I said, great freedom, but I have questions. I have questions about who I would be if I hadn't been on the pill.
Well, that's a nice segue into talking about menopause, I guess, and then onto your journey with it. I mean, when did your interest in the menopause begin, and how did that then develop into what is now trying to become a business for you?
Well, I mean, I, like many people, didn't think about menopause as something that was going to happen when I'm old, like 60. You know, like I didn't even think about it, and it's something you don't want to happen because I think the stigma around it is that, all the language about it, you're drying up, you're going to have all these problems sexually, you're going to be irrelevant because you're looking at yourself at that age in your 50s or 60s or whatever. And you can't imagine that you're going to still keep producing and being a part of society. So it was a negative in my mind and something I didn't want. And in my 40s, I was still hoping to get married and have kids.
Can I just pause on that and I guess just ask some questions on it from a totally uneducated layman's perspective? Because I mean, just before we started recording, we were talking about testosterone, and I was saying that for even something that is my domain because I'm a male, all I know about or think about with testosterone is sex drive, and it's to me it's as simple as that. When it comes to menopause, I guess all I know from a male perspective is it just means your body stops producing all the tackle to make babies anymore. But don't really know any more or less than that as to what are other problems, what are other side effects? Is it long lasting? Yeah. I mean, I guess like we said, we hear jokes made about grumpiness or hot sweats or whatever it may be. But I mean, can we just dig a bit deeper into what it actually is?
Yeah. Okay. So the average age of menopause is 51, but it's different for everyone. And menopause is actually basically a moment in time, but also all the years after you go through it, where you haven't had a period for 1 year. So your ovaries have gotten smaller, your estrogen levels have dropped, your ovaries aren't making the estrogen, maybe a little bit, and your adrenal glands have taken over that job. Your progesterone levels have dropped, your testosterone levels have dropped, and other hormone levels have risen to sort of balance that out. And the thing that gets everyone, though, is that menopause that year, and I just went through that year where I didn't have a period, and you're sort of waiting to go through menopause. It's a wild year. I didn't know if I was up or down. I felt like I was like Dorothy in the house being flown around. But now that I've gone through it, I really feel myself coming together. And I really feel myself getting my act together and feeling much more calm. But perimenopause is all the years before that. And perimenopause can start 7 to 10 years before menopause. And the beginning stages of perimenopause, your progesterone, which sort of covers your stress response, sleep, mood, through that hypothalamus, pituitary, adrenal axis that we have, the progesterone starts to recede. And that can cause a lot of early problems. And that's what happened to me. And I started to have big sleep problems, nightmares, fear of flying out of nowhere, anxious times, intrusive thoughts, just sheets of fear, like just thinking, oh my God, and I didn't know what was happening to me. And that led me into therapy and a whole bunch of things that have really helped me get my act together. But I didn't know what was going on. And then I started having weird symptoms because then your estrogen starts rising and falling. So you have estrogen rising and falling. Your testosterone, which is, by the way, women's most abundant hormone, is testosterone. It's already been falling, right? It's already, it was already falling since you're 30 or whatever, late 20s. So all of that is going on, and you can be having a real time of it. hot flashes are a little bit later, maybe. Maybe your periods have changed a little bit. You can have brain fog, mood issues. If you're having trouble sleeping, everything is hard. There's loads of women on social media now talking about itchy ears, itchy face. I would have sort of like a tingling sensation. My head would feel weird. I always thought I was dying because keep in mind, I didn't even know what was happening. And now we know that if you can take certain steps, that you can mitigate a lot of those problems. But what I think is going on, and what the research is starting to show, is that women just torpedo it, just working, just going full tilt, right? Whatever you've been doing, you've been partying and drinking, you've been working out, you've been raising kids, you've been working, you're burning yourself out. And that is one of the things that when you hit perimenopause, things just don't work as well. And you just hear women saying, I'm just not able to sleep. I'm not able to be as fit. I'm not able to function in the way that I was.
And did you lose sex drive as a woman as well during this?
Like, it's different for every single woman. Like, honestly, I would say, like, I never did. Although I feel like now I have a bit of a like, yeah, I would like to have sex, but I can also not, which is like a really cool thing to just be like, yeah, it'd be nice, but I could also pass, which I wasn't like that before. So I'm finding that sort of like a little bit strange, but it's different for every woman. A lot of women do. And then they end up doing really well on testosterone or estrogen therapy. There's vagina problems, there's like all sorts of issues that can happen. But I really do feel, and from the research, that we're seeing that it's tied to your overall health. So if you enter in a stage of burnout, that can really cause problems. If you enter in a state of poor gut health, which I did, I had IBS for years, that causes a lot of problems. If you had adverse childhood experiences, which many, many of us didn't deal with the trauma of that. I had trauma from my early job when I used to go to murders and, when I was around 30, I'd go to murders, horrible car accidents, terrible. All those things sort of combined. And when that progesterone recedes, it's a bit, think of like the ocean when the tide goes out and there's just like a bunch of garbage on the beach. That's what I say. It's like, it makes it that much more difficult.
And how are you treating it? I mean, is this like testosterone replacement therapy for men? I.e., we notice diminishing hormones and we can artificially replace them. Is the same kind of concept?
So this is where my platform comes in, because I could see that it was very polarized. That was one of the reasons that I wanted to get into it. It's gotten so much more polarized. There's a real push on one side for a natural menopause, and then there's a push on the other side for hormone therapy. Hormone therapy is the answer. You take estrogen and everything will be okay. But it's really not that simple, because it really is an all systems situation. You hit your 40s, the hormones create a situation of imbalance, but there's a whole bunch of other things going on. If you have metabolic problems, if you have inflammation, an inflammatory lifestyle, if you're having oxidative stress, we have lower nitric oxide. All of these things like merge together and create a deeper pathway towards disease, diabetes, dementia. Women have much higher rates of dementia, cardiovascular disease. And what's being sort of done is like, it's being very simplified. You go through menopause, you lose your hormones, and all of a sudden you're at risk for all these diseases. But it's not that simple at all. So just simply taking estrogen isn't going to save you from dementia. There are no studies that show that. And simply taking estrogen in certain situations might lower your risk for cardiovascular disease, but you're way better to be moving and lifting weights and trying to boost your nitric oxide and trying to lower your inflammation. And so there are quarters of the internet that are growing much faster than me. There are doctors that have millions of followers who are saying just that. And you know how that kind of message flies now, right?
Yeah.
Like, hormone therapy is the answer. Everyone wants the one thing. The thing about this is it's kind of an all systems thing. And I think the transition that you go through at midlife, and men go through it too, there's a reckoning of like, what have I been doing? What have I been through? How is it hurting me? How is it harming me? What do I need to change? And I think that that is one of the reasons we even go through menopause, is to have that reckoning so you can go through the rest of your life in a sort of happier, more balanced place.
And can you identify and combat it earlier and have less problems? Like, so when you're in the perimenopause stage, can you be doing things then, taking treatment then?
Yeah. I mean, my goal is, first of all, for people to know about it, and then to take steps earlier, even before menopause. So you know, I had all this anxiety my whole life, and I would have to exercise every day. And to deal with my anxiety, sometimes I would do a spinning class and then go to Bikram yoga. Like that's how I had kept a balance. Well, that's too much exercise, right? That's not enough. You're not getting enough rest. So not burning yourself out with crazy amounts of over exercising. A lot of people over exercise. A lot of women undereat for years and years and years. They aren't nourished. So fixing your food issues, making sure you're not working and burning yourself out, making sure you deal with your trauma and process some of the things you're carrying around. I think the evidence shows those things make menopause and perimenopause worse. I think dealing with those things can make it better. We don't have like the randomized control trial of looking at a group of people and making sure they did that, but it just stands to reason. And another thing I've asked a lot of menopause doctors are, who are the worst cases? Who have it the worst? And they often say people who have really bad relationships, or they're really lonely and alone. They don't have that human connection. And that makes sense too, because one of the longest running studies, it's a Harvard study, puts connection at the top of, our longevity, like our ability to have good relationships and connect with people and feel like we have that in the world. So if you don't have that, if you have a dead relationship or you're living a lie, which a lot of people hit their 40s and they realize they are, right? So all those things can make it worse. My dream is for women to sort of not be like me and be like into their 40s and hit a wall, but to be around 35 and be like, okay, what can I figure out here? What can I unravel?
So how did this become a business for you? Where did the idea come from? The platform, the newsletter?
Well, when I realized that I was in perimenopause, I didn't even know that word. That word's become much more popularized. I was about 47 and I skipped a period. And I didn't think I was pregnant. I didn't really. I was like,
you stole my joke from behind it.
No, I think I was like, yeah, that's a legitimately skipped period. I can't. And my period had been a little wonky, but when you're trap flying between North America, you can always be like, okay, it was that. I was in denial. I say the first symptom of perimenopause is denial, because no one wants to be in perimenopause. Once I realized I was in it, I started Googling and looking for information, because I love content, and I just hated the content. Like I just hated it. It was either by a company that was just doing like freelancer.com, very generic content, or it was designed very angled to sell something with a point of view, very lame, very negative. Like back then, the Daily Mail, which has done some really good menopause coverage, was just, fear mongering. You're going to lose your husband, and your vagina is going to dry up, you're this or that. And I just thought there has to be a better way, because I had, I knew older women who were living their best lives. Some of them went on hormone therapy, some weren't. They just seemed to have a sort of a carefree nature to them that I always wanted. And so I thought, well, I do content, and I've been lucky enough to live in this great period of time in my career where I used to have to rent a video camera and an editor to edit, and now I can just use my phone and I can put out a newsletter. And so I'm just going to put out a newsletter. And
that was the first part of the journey.
I thought, how am I just going to get this out? Okay, I got like 200 people that I knew, and I just started sending out a newsletter. I modeled it on Goop because Gwyneth Paltrow started a newsletter, and I thought I think she's a tremendous businesswoman, and her model, she started with a newsletter, just a simple newsletter that she sent out to 10,000 people. And
just picking some specific bits here, because for the guys and girls listening who want to I guess distribute content. I mean, I started a newsletter myself 7 or 8 months ago, and my first people it went out to was my existing database as well. Built up from my LinkedIn contacts, my email contacts. But you were saying you sent out to 200 people. These were the 200 people that you already knew. So these were you're not gone out looking for people who may specifically be interested in menopause.
No, like that's one mistake I made, Matt. Like honestly, that's one mistake I made. I just went with 200 people that I knew, some of them in media, some of them not in media. I could have gone way wider, and I could have gone way bigger. And this is where fear comes into it, right? Like this is one thing I've battled in the last couple of years. It's just like making the decisions to put yourself in a place of real success. And just now when you're saying that, I'm like, why did I do that? I had all the PR agencies. I had everyone. I played small when I did that newsletter. I did.
But I mean, I wasn't actually picking fault on that.
No, I'm glad you mentioned it.
I was just, I guess, saying that everybody's got somewhere to start. I mean, I guess you could take that comment both ways, couldn't you? You could say, well, I'm saying you're playing too small. You could have done this, but I guess for the people who say, well, I don't have a database. I don't know anyone. Everybody knows somebody, even if it's simply your brother, your sister, your mom's best friend. We've all got a place to start from.
Absolutely. And people will help you, and people will find you. And I guess if I could change anything, I would shift from a place of, oh, I'm doing this thing and it might bother you and you might be just doing me a favor, to I'm doing something and people are going to want to find out about it. Because that's what I've learned over the last couple of years, as I am now recognized in the global conversation. You know, I traveled to New York. I was on a panel with like Dr. Sharon Malone and Stacey London, who's a celebrity there in June. Like, I am invited on podcasts. Like, I am someone who has become sort of a person who is positioned, who is changing the conversation. That wasn't bothering anyone. People want to hear from me. They like that. If you have a message and you feel called to do it, just try to take that part out, because that's just extra baggage you're putting on yourself.
And so what's the worst that someone's going to do? They're going to press unsubscribe.
Yeah, and that happened a couple of times, and I was like, okay. And there were some people that I knew, right? Like, still, I'd be like, oh, really?
But it's funny because, you know, when I first started to send mine out, I mean, I remember that. I forget the exact numbers, but let's say my original database was about 5,000 people.
Okay, amazing.
Which was, you know, but it wasn't like a clean prime database. This was just anyone who was a LinkedIn contact, anyone who had ever sent an email to. But it was my place to start from. And in the first 2 or 3 weeks, I do a weekly newsletter. It goes out every Friday. In the first 2 or 3 or 4 weeks, the unsubscribes were, I say frightening. It depends on your viewpoint here. And over the course of about a month, I think we went from about 5,000 or 6,000 subscribers down to like 2,200,
Oh, wow.
2,300. Now, my initial reaction was one of absolute horror that, you know, that nobody's interested in. I'm going backwards quicker than I can go forwards. But then what you learn very quickly is, you know, what is the point in putting out content to people who are not interested in you? Mm-hmm. And there's always going to be people not interested in you. You know, I mean, I'm guessing your audience is, you know, women over the age, over 40 probably, or whatever, you know, so 22-year-old men are probably not going to be your audience. What is the point in kidding yourself of having this massive database? And whilst at first I was very, very depressed that my number of subscribers was coming down, what then started to get me more excited was that my open rates and my click-through rates were going up. And ultimately, it was just it was looking at the wrong stats and being delusional about the numbers. And, you know, I mean, now I think we're 12,000, 13,000, which is built up, and you know, an open rate that had gone down to 18 and 19%, you know, originally, because it was horrendous with all this data on there that just wasn't my audience, just wasn't clean. And now we have, you know, a very clean database, and the open rates at 41%, 42%, and starts to get good numbers. But I mean, yeah, my biggest piece of advice to anyone really in this kind of content space is not to get upset about people who don't want to listen to you, because there's always going to be people that don't want to listen to you, but your job is to find the people who do want to listen to you.
Well, what's happening, and you realize, is you're actually finding your real people. So bye. Yeah. So when those people unsubscribe, I don't get upset anymore. I'm like, okay, fine. Yeah, bye. You know, like, thank you. I don't want you here, because I want my 50% open rate, and I want to be speaking to people who are really interested, and to find those like super fans, not fans. I don't like that word, but just like super subscribers, people who are really into your content. And the other thing that happened early on that I did not expect was that I started getting CEOs of some of the companies, because this is a very nascent space business-wise, and we're all trying to figure out how to make money. And one of the first subscribers who reached out to me, who said, I really like what you're doing, is Alicia Jackson, and she's the CEO of a company called Evernow. And that was the first company to get funding in the menopause space. They got $25 million, and Cameron Diaz and Gwyneth Paltrow and Drew Barrymore were among that round of funding. I've become friends with Alicia. I've helped Evernow. I didn't anticipate that I would have those kinds of people on my list too. So in the middle of women helping women, I've also got like the movers and shakers in the space on there. So that sort of helped me feel.
I'm just struggling to imagine Cameron Diaz going through the menopause.
Listen,
I want to be there to support her.
Listen, I did an interview with Alicia Jackson about this, and she said, look, if these women, Drew Barrymore, Cameron Diaz, and Gwyneth Paltrow are all my age, they're all going through perimenopause, they're all having a hard time, and they're all talking about it, and they know a good investment when they see one. And Alicia Jackson said, look, Emery, if these women with all the resources and all the people they can see are struggling, what do you think the average person is doing? So it's been gratifying to see. And I'm not saying I knew what was, I'm just, you know, I've watched trends for a long time, but I knew it was going to break open in a way that was going to be meaningful. I didn't anticipate you'd have Cameron Diaz talking about perimenopause and investing in companies. I didn't expect that.
And how did you grow your database? Your mailing list. So you started with these 200 people who you already knew, and I think you said you got about 25,000 subscribers.
No, gosh, no. I'm at like 10 now. So, yeah, okay. But it's a very dedicated.
But it's massive growth. Yeah. In what period? What period is that?
I've been doing it for about 3.5 years, and I'm still learning. I'm taking a course right now called Audience Factory with a community I'm in. I found a really great entrepreneurship community, and I would recommend that to anyone because, if you're like me, you have friends, no one knows what you're talking about. No one wants to talk about it.
I'd imagine something quite niche like this is word of mouth is good. Recommendations forwarding to other people.
Yeah, I did a summit in 2021 with 2 women in Canada. Summits are a great way to get a big chunk of people. Their email address grabs. I don't think I want to do a summit again because I'm always trying to divide like making money and serving women. I think they're very confusing because basically you just throw a bunch of interviews into a package and then you offer it for free and then you offer a VIP offering. It's like a funnel sort of thing. But I just felt like in our summit, we interviewed some great people, but if you were the average woman, you would probably have left it somewhat confused because you have some people talking about this, some people talking about that. If I do a summit again, and they are great for getting email addresses, they are. But if I do a summit again, I'm going to do much more meaningful and thoughtful because I've created my own expert panel of really smart people who are really open-minded. And I think I would just do it with them. But it was word of mouth. I also moved my newsletter to Substack and monetized it a year ago. And that was something that no one understands because Substack is a platform. It started out with journalists, but now everyone's doing it. And they just made it very easy for you to charge a fee or make it people able to subscribe to your newsletter for a fee.
And how do you monetize it? Is it a subscription only newsletter, or you've got upsells and?
Well, I'm still working on all of it, but it's basically over on Substack, and that's one revenue stream. I put out a free weekly weekend newsletter that's sort of a roundup of what's going on, and then I do a deeper dive during the week.
Every week, newsletters every week.
Yeah, and so I'll do a deeper dive during the week, and usually you have to pay for that one. And then sometimes if I feel like it's really something people should know, I'll send that out for free. And sometimes people will subscribe. So I at the moment I have like over 100 subscribers.
Well, I was about to say, I don't know how much you want to tell us, but what's the pay rate against, so you got about 10,000 free people and about 100 paid subscribers.
Yeah. And so that's basically about
1%.
Normal. Yeah. I mean, it's not making me a ton of money, but it's going to grow. Like it's growing and it's becoming a revenue stream. And there are people killing it on Substack. And then I launched a podcast because I had a brand come to me who wanted to sponsor it. So that's how I ended up launching a podcast.
Is that a weekly podcast?
Yes. And
what do you talk about? How do you, because I mean, you've got to stay niche on menopause, but how do you stay niche enough, but then not be boring, I guess, talk about the same thing each week?
Well, the thing is that when I say hot flash ink, menopause is everything. It's mind, body, soul. It's basically everything that you're going to go through in your 40s and 50s. So there is no end of topics. Like we can do a podcast on bone health, and then the next week I can do a podcast on dealing with your emotionally immature parent, because that's something you're going to go through in your 50s, and that's going to make your life more stressful. And then we can do a podcast on sexual desire, pelvic health. Like there is just no end.
Sure.
We can do a study on it. We can focus on the people who did this study that just found out that most animals go through menopause. Everyone always said it was only whales and humans. And now we found out that it's like 80% of all creation. So that's one of the people I'm going to chase. To me, there's no end to it. It's not for everyone, obviously. But if people go through, and people have said, I'm binging it, I'm going through, I'm following, because what they like about my podcast is that I'm just coming at it like, hey, I'm just figuring this out with the rest of you guys. But from my journalistic point of view, I have no agenda other than I don't think there's easy, quick fixes. And this is a space where there are 1 million studies on pregnancy, something not all women go through. Okay. So there's 1 million, when you look in the scientific database, there's 1 million studies. There's 1/10 of that on menopause. Like there's no science, there's barely any science. So we can't be too certain about it. And what you have is a lot of doctors doing podcasts who are sort of like confirming their own biases and talking to them. And this is different. This is where you're going to come and you're going to get me asking questions and just trying to figure stuff out without an agenda. Certainly not a pharmaceutical agenda. If anything, I'm I'm not anti-pharma, but I'm circumspect.
How else do you create content? Do you have a social presence for this as well?
Yeah. So I've been doing, this is one thing, Matt, where now when I'm taking some time and I'm just organizing and building to grow and to monetize further. And everyone's saying, focus on one thing. Like you should just have the newsletter. Just do the newsletter and make it awesome. And I'm like, I can't, that's not the kind of person I am though. I'm like a multi-passionate person. I love TikTok. I love TikTok is where I've been most successful. I love Instagram and making reels. I have a YouTube channel. All of this is important and you reach people on all different places. So anyway, I have all the social media. I'd love to find a way to maybe not have to feed the social media beast, but I also feel that on there, hot flashing is also a presence of moderation because things have gotten quite crazy and there's people making wild claims and not backing things up. Yeah. And doctors, there's doctors on social media talking about menopause in, I believe, a really, really irresponsible way.
What would their agenda be?
If you have a private clinic and you sell hormone therapy and you're talking about, listen, you got to be on hormone therapy or you're going to get a disease, that to me seems like a pretty big agenda. I'm not getting my information about menopause from someone who operates a private clinic and makes money from getting me on hormone therapy.
And how many other people like you are out there? I mean, are you quite unique in this space?
Yeah. Like, I still can't believe it. I still can't believe that I'm the only person who's a journalist who's talking about this full time. And I also think I would have grown a lot bigger if I had been speaking in this way. Like, what social media is like, what our world is like right now. If you offer people a very simple solution, they'll grab it. And like, no one wants things to be complicated. I come at this from a complicated place and I've been going through it too. So my growth has been smaller, but I feel good about it. I don't aim to have like 1 million people. But
I guess going back to the business side of this, you don't need to have 1 million people. That's those existing 10,000 subscribers, let's say subscribers which have turned into 100 members, which I'm sure grow a bit over time. Then you've got those 100, 200 people who are very loyal fans of yours that you can then have another product at a higher price that you can sell them, and then those you can keep moving them up the value ladder. And I think one of the biggest misconceptions people have is how big an audience needs to be to actually make it viably monetizable and be able to replace your existing income.
Yeah. And what I'm learning is that the social media audience doesn't always translate into sales of these products. People are sort of finding out, like, people are getting really tired, right? They're getting really tired of courses. They're getting really tired of being sold to in certain ways. So having this really enthusiastic, engaged, dedicated email list and podcast listener group, I think is, in the long run, you're much more able to sell things. And anytime I've had a webinar, I found that. So I've started holding those, but I'm working towards getting that product. I'm going to have a digital book. I'm going to have et cetera, et cetera.
So if you're talking to aspiring journalists, aspiring newsletter writers, I mean, what would be your 2 or 3 biggest tips to someone, from someone who's kind of done it without advice, finding your feet?
Well, you can get advice and figure it out. That would probably be a good way. Get in a community first, because I could have.
How long did it take you to get into the communities and find these people?
It's probably been about 6 or 8 months, and then I really.
The 6 or 8 months that you've been in them, or you did 6 or 8 months on your own and then got into the.
No, I did a lot on my own, and I've had a lot of mentorship from different people that I've met who are in business, but they're not doing what I'm doing. So I spent a lot of time floundering. I just found a book called Content Inc. by a guy named Joe Paluzzi, and I'm reading this book and almost crying because he's doing the model that I've been doing in my head that everyone's telling me is wrong. So I'm finding my feet. I would say try to find that community first, but also stay true to what it is you want to do, because I didn't want to do what other people were saying. Do you know what I mean? I didn't want to come out with a product and build content to sell that product. I wanted to create the community. I was willing to keep working and do this on the side and fund it myself until I could figure out exactly what it wanted to be. And I'm still confident with that. And I don't think there's a person who started in a business who hasn't made, dumb mistakes. But I would say definitely get some wise counsel with someone who's on your wavelength, right? Because I remember telling a couple of guys about my idea, and they're like, "Who's your target market?" And it's like, well, it's women going through menopause. It's like, I like your question. And as a journalist, one of the things I've handicapped myself with is like, I tell stories. I don't do things. I'm not a businesswoman. I said that for the first couple of years. I don't know anything about business. I've stopped saying those things because really watching and writing, I've written about loads of businesses that have gone out of business, launched with great fanfare, lots of money, PR, the big office and everything. They're not around anymore, right? Common sense plays a huge role. You're a businessman. I think you know this, right? Like common sense plays a really big role. And so if you have common sense and you can get wise counsel and you can combine those two things and you can believe in yourself and not, talk yourself down, I think that those three things starting out is how I would.
I mean, at what point did you, because you say I'm not a businesswoman, but at what point did you kind of realize that you needed to be one as well? I mean, do you think it was, I don't mean an excuse, but do you think in the beginning you were just saying, well, I'm a content creator, I'm not a businesswoman and I don't need to be a businesswoman, I'm just a content creator. Yeah. I mean, at what point did you realize, hang on a minute, I need to learn about, content's always going to be my passion and my focus, but I've got to at least have the basic skills of business?
Probably about a year ago where I was like, look, I'll create content all day long. That's my specialty. That's easy for me, right? That's fun and easy for me. This part is hard, but this part is necessary or this won't exist. It is just going to be an expensive hobby that I have. And I don't want that. And I can reach way more people if I can make it grow and come up with concrete things that I can sell. So I think a lot of it was just my own coming of age and self-esteem to say like, I can do this. I'm going to give myself all the tools and skills to do this. Because there's a little bit of, if I didn't really do it 100%, if I didn't go straight to the wall with it and get all of these skills, I guess I would always have an excuse for why it didn't take off. Right?
And what's your target? I mean, how big do you see this market being? I mean, obviously, the market's enormous and never ending, but I mean, how big do you see this being as a business for you?
I think it can be something that can sustain me, and it's something that I would eventually like to sell. I feel that I could build it to something that another company would purchase my content. I mean, I was reading Content Inc. They just sold their newsletter, The Tilt, and The Tilt is just your basic niche that you cover content in that no one else has, which is what I have that no one else has. I can see building that up to a point where I would sell it, but it's not like I want to make millions with it, but I also would like to have a good life, and I would like to be able to get enough help. I've hired one person, but I would like to be able to get enough people to be really pumping on the content front and using the library of content that I already have and reaching more people.
Does this content live somewhere? So you've got the newsletter, you've got the podcast, but I presume you have a website, and that is that's membership-based website as well?
No, Hot Flash Inc. I have a website, and there's my expert panel there. There's lots of content there. Everything is Hot Flash Inc. You can find. And Substack is where the membership is. And I think I might eventually make a community on an app of my own making, or maybe a community like Circle or Mighty, where I can have a closed community where I can charge a monthly fee. I
mean, I would imagine in this kind of a space that that would be massive. But people who are all suffering, suffering that same thing together that they all want to talk about together. Yeah. And again, you're going back to the business side of things. I mean, I've always been very, let's say, envious of other people's community models, because I mean, ultimately, you're not doing anything. I mean, you talk about charging people to be part of your WhatsApp group. I mean, you don't even need to be present in your WhatsApp group. I mean, you're literally just getting your 100 people, for example, and letting them talk to each other. But
100%. This group that I'm in, Mike Dillard, he's a marketing guy. He also does crypto and investment. And it was like I found all the three things that I wanted to learn about in one thing. But I mean, he's just offered so much value, and I don't think it's a lot for him because it's easy for him, right? He's been doing it for 15 years. So he'll have a call once a week. Same thing. I'm kind of envious because it's like, I think once you get to that level, you can do it and it's not incredibly taxing to you.
I mean, I think, when it comes to these membership type models, I always remember, I forget who it was that said it, but, someone's expression was that they come for the content and they stay for the community.
Yeah.
And I think, having been a subscriber to many other people's membership sites myself, or seeing how other people interact, I mean, it's so true, and yeah. A lot of people, they get bored of the learning or don't even really have any intention of kind of continue with that program, but they've met some friends, and it's someone to talk to, someone to hang out with.
That's funny, because in that community, I am talking to people now about crypto. It's like, yeah, I was trying to buy that coin, and I'm getting this problem with the transfer, and yeah, I became that person, and I was never a community type person. One thing I love with Hot Flash is that I think because of the kind of person I am, where I'm just like, look, I'm very curious. That nothing is wrong here, and there's no one way to do this. It's really attracted a really nice group of people, and I don't have the crappy stuff that happens that a lot of other people get on social media, or I see whenever I comment on someone else's post. It's just a really lovely, sane, curious, searching. I just want to do this. I want to get through this time in my life. I want to move on to, like, it's that kind of person. It's really attracting that kind of person, and that's something I'm proud about.
Well, listen, Anne-Marie, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you here. And you know, I know that at the beginning we kind of talked about some of the different things in it. I've very much enjoyed the conversation of what I thought was something. I'm thinking, how can I talk about menopause? How can I talk about menopause for an hour? But it's been you know, it's been an interesting story for me. Love the business side of it, and it's you know, it's great to see your clear passion about this. And you know, and also you know, I always love to hear about other people learning because you know, one of my biggest criticisms of you know, most people out there is that, you know, people switch off from learning when they're 18, 19, 20, you know, whether that's topics outside of their field or even in their field itself. And you know, if we're not learning, we're not growing, and if we're not growing, we're dying. So I love you know, love to hear that, you know, at your I want to say at your stage in life, but
it's a stage in life.
I also feel it's I'm making out you so old, but you know, it for me, it's great to see someone, you know, one you know, plus 40, plus 50, whatever, you know, picking up books, picking up new topics, and wanting to, you know, be passionate and dig deep on it. So.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because I would say, you know, I haven't gotten married or had kids, so I live a much different life than some of my friends, but I will say having that passion and zest and purpose and finding it and learning has to do so much with it is key to happiness in midlife. I really do think, and I can see that in people who are just talking about retirement. And, you know, I don't know why people think you ever stop learning. It's difficult, but it's the magic ingredient, I think.
Well, I know we've mentioned Hot Flash a few times, but just before you go, just tell us some social media handles, website addresses, and stuff where people can find this. Whether that's you know, women who want to join in the conversation, or whether it's guys who want to reach out to you and learn about the business, or you know, join a community.
It's Hot Flash Inc. everywhere, all across Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, YouTube. On Substack, it's Hot Flash Inc. and my website is Hot Flash Inc. and the podcast as well.
And just to be clear for all you English speakers and not non-Canadians, it's Flash as an FLASH.
Yes.
Not flush as I thought it was in the beginning.
They're called flushes
Hot Flash Inc.
Yeah.
So Anne-Marie, thank you very much again. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you for having me.